week of compassion is there when things happen, when a time happens that's unexpected, when something goes unplanned, when natural disasters, when mudslides, famine, drought, fire, they are there. And I think that that is part of a reflection of the belief in God, for when all things happen in our lives, God is there and present. And sometimes God uses us in and through those times. And this is part of my sermon for today. So it's a little bit backwards, mixed up, whatnot. And that is because, as it says, offering me, oh, no, go back, you're fine, you can leave it, sorry. There was a song that Elizabeth and I found on Song Select, which is our church library of music, I guess. And we were both so excited because the words were absolutely perfect, and we dug for the music, trying to find something video or whatnot, and could not. And so this is the song. I'm going to read it to you because I don't actually know how the verses go. But this is what it said. Beauty for ashes and joy for mourning. Strength in the battle and peace in the storm. Love without measure, grace like a treasure. Mercy has found me, and now I'm not my own. For such a time as this, I live to give you praise. For such a time as this, I give you all my days. For such a time as this, my life will glorify you. For I know that I was born for such a time as this. That's it. Literally, that's the song. And there's a bridge, which I'm not even going to go on, y'all. But I read those words, and our scripture today comes from Esther chapter 4, verses 12 through 16. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that this you have come to the royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will go and fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. This is the reading of our scripture, the reading of the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
We give praise to God in good moments, right? I hope we do. Admittedly, sometimes we forget because we're excited. We're in a moment of good things and good happening, and we're like, oh, Lord, it's good. But the words of Esther, which you have to be familiar with the book of Esther, and it's not a long book. It literally takes up like 3 pages in your scripture. You may or may not miss it as it comes after Nehemiah, Esther, and occasionally you'll just flip right over into Job. That's where it's sandwiched in. And it's a book that depicts Purim, which, if you are familiar with the Hebrew calendar, actually began this last week. I couldn't have planned it better. But I have a story to tell you. Not the story of Esther, but the story of another woman. She and her husband were excited. He had just received a new job. And so they packed up their things. Packed up several cars worth and traveled 700-800 miles to their new home, a new beginning. She found out she was expecting a child and so did not begin work in the way that she had planned. Once that baby arrived, it was time, right? And so she received a phone call saying, hey, we need someone, something. Do you mind coming in? And so she went and she spoke to those and she interviewed and did all of the things. And then it happened that on May 19th, 2013, she stood here. That's my story in a nutshell. Several details left out. I didn't know then what I knew now, right? How happy I would be. Thank you. I like my little spot. How much joy I would find. How much love would be present. You don't know those things sometimes when you are in the midst of what is happening. And is that not the story of Esther? She didn't know. It took someone from the outside pointing it out to her that perhaps she was necessary to that moment and time. We don't know where life will take us, but hindsight, oh, isn't it a wonderful thing when you realize you were there at the moment you needed to be? Be it a new job, be it the loss of a job, be it a move. Perhaps we are where we need to be for such a time as this. Esther's story is one that has fascinated me. Because at this moment in time, for the time of which she is needed, she's not very old. And perhaps we read it and we go, oh, well, she had everything going for her. I mean, she was the wife of a king. Had servants. Don't we want at least one? If only to do the laundry. She had a fabulous wardrobe. She had what many would consider power and yet did not understand what that power was. And so her uncle said, Perhaps you're where you need to be. That's a perspective of people of faith that we sometimes struggle with, particularly in times of difficulty. I consider that last summer when Chad and I were keynoting for a week at camp. As many of you are aware, we keynote for Created to Be Me camp, and we did several weeks last summer. One week we did via Skype because the original keynoters had not and were not able to be there. So we did it over Skype, and we received a phone call midweek that the original creators of the camp's father had passed away. And had we not taken that role on or done what we needed to do in that week of time, she would have not been present with her father. You see, we don't see the impact in our own little circles of things that go on in our lives. We don't know what a smile can mean to a person at the register when you are going through line and they've had 15 different difficult customers throughout the course of a day, and you get up there and you just say, well, how's your day going? And of course, in the way that many people in customer service generally, I say generally, do, they're like, oh, it's good, and what? But in reality, they've had 10 difficult people before you. But you offer them kindness and graciousness. Or holding the door open. Or doing little and small gestures that we don't know the impact of. You see, Esther, in the story of Esther, has no idea of her powerful capabilities. She doesn't know that 2,000, 3,000 plus years later, they are still celebrating Purim. She's just doing what she needs to do in the moments that she needs to do them as a person of faith and belief. What more ought we to do? Because we're not Esther. I don't wear a tiara unless my kids have put my princess one on. But as a person of faith, I can live out my faith, be I in a castle or a hovel or in my car on Greenville Boulevard. I can live out my faith without considering what will happen in the future. Because a time as this is now, my friends. It's now. Time is that relative and crazy and wonderful thing where we have moments of nostalgia. I was reading an article the other day that those that grew up in the late 80s and 90s and beginning of the 90s are considered a nostalgic generation. You see it on the toy shelves. Every single toy that I played with in 1990 is now back in action. New and improved and shiny and bright. And yet, it's not 1990 anymore, y'all. I was 5 years old in 1990. I know that makes some of you cringe. I'm sorry. Because I can see you calculating how old you were. They didn't have computers and cell phones and all this other sort of stuff that we have now. We live now. in history that is not available to us today. We are in this time, in place, and in history. So how are we expressing our faith now? Are we praising God every day of every moment now? Are we living as people of faith every day and every moment now? That is the challenge of Lent. You see, it's a time of introspection and reflection and consideration of who we are and who we want to be as people of faith. It asks of us to draw closer to God today, not to reflect on what was yesterday or to make plans for the future, but now. Because we don't know what's happening tomorrow. We don't know what's coming. But we do know what now is, what we have available to us for the rest of today. We can make plans. But how often do those plans change? We need to be conscientious as people of faith that our moments in time are unknown. We might not get a book of scripture written about our moment. But our moment is now. I read through this and it's big, right? And it's overwhelming. Because the simplest of concepts is to live as a person of faith now. And yet, what does that mean? What does that entail? I think the most wonderful part about the book of Esther is how she changes from beginning to end. And how she is prepared for that moment, for the time such as this, by making mistakes, by not being perfect. Remember, she's not the one who said, "Oh Lord, here I am." It was someone else who pointed it out to her. And yet here we are. My hope and my prayer is that as we continue on our journeys of faith towards Easter and beyond, that we recall to ourselves that we are here and present for such a time as this, as people of faith. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how to hold another accountable outside of myself. But my hope and my prayer is that we are all conscientious of the fact that as people of faith, we are here and present today.